cosmopolitan. Some of us are Turkish, we have Spanish, Germans, and even Costa Ricans. Our main focus is sensible and emotional architecture. We do a lot of philosophy and creative research, and we spend a lot of time, and we are very focused on, of course, on our Instagram page. Our philosophical background is that we read and study a lot of the classical field of philosophy, and we really believe that those theses are universal, and architecture also deals with universal struggles, such as the reason of being or aesthetics. And we transcend these theses in our daily work, and it inspires us and help us to identify with our ideas and our work. For example, we have different categories of philosophers, according to their thoughts, such as Nietzsche, who is our fetish for the category overcome. Pessoa, it's the master of melancholy. We just love him for inventing a flood of imaginary characters and heteronyms that he uses to express different opinions and sometimes very unpopular views. And yeah, we spend a big part of our life reading and feeling these thoughts of the philosophers. They are mainly all about the difficulties and struggles in life, each of them in their own view. Therefore, we want to begin this lecture with reviewing just a couple of theses very briefly, and you can read the long version in our book. We are currently finalizing one, and it's going to be published in a couple of months. So the first thesis of tonight is becoming. Becoming, yeah. An architect is not an is, an architect is becoming. Every architect should understand him or herself as a project. He or she needs a concept for his or her own life. For example, Oscar Wilde created a life concept for his friend, Lily Langtry. He told her to dress completely black and to go out every morning for 30 minutes at the same time in the same park in order that she would be recognized and noticed for it. He also had some fancy ideas about putting fresh flowers every day in the main entrance hall of his house. To create is very uncomfortable and not at all a reliable process for all of us. To really make a difference, you must have a revolutionary spirit. Sloterdijk, for example, sees it in a very athletic way. He calls it an aggressive survivalism and self-elevation through exercise and training. And in our words, it's like when you are running, when your inner voice tells you to stop, you can still push yourself and keep going and run some more. The next thesis is overcome. Overcome through eternal suffering. For us, life is suffering, and the architect suffers even more. In the best case, the architect is in a constant emotional state of oscillating between euphoria and depression. We believe that there is no architect that comes out of the nowhere. Everybody copies at some time ideas from other architects, and the important thing is to find their own conception, their own language. And the great always find a style of their own. The overcome theory is eloquently expressed by Nietzsche in his Zarathustra. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How can you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? Or less eloquently, it's never finished. The next one is beauty, reality, romanticism. In Europe, we can say that for the last 200 years, we are really living in a sort of period of realism. Of course, realism is a very important aesthetic dogma. I also love excellent technical drawings, but we believe that since the era of Romanticism in the 1800s, with artists such as Caspar David Friedrich, the beauty must always make a bond with the real. And unfortunately, the real is quite often really ugly. And beauty is not necessarily an economic argument, but nevertheless, it's the most important argument. The current generation wants again to talk about emotions, sensibility, mystic, and beauty. The surface nowadays is used as illusion. Technical images are disrupted into post-technical illustrations. It is again about unveiling the secrets. Beauty is en vogue again, we can say. We see the romantic drawings as a post-digital artistic movement. The next thoughts are about the Instamillion. What is the Instamillion? It's Instagram has a lot of different forums. For each discipline, there is a proper sphere in which ambitious creatives have the possibility to present their work and get credits for it. It's a sort of democratic process where the best are elected by the votes of the audience. It's an open platform for everybody that is ambitious enough to participate. And the milieu has incredible power. It's like the years in Paris that attracted all the artists from all over the world. It amplifies the creativity. You understand what's going on around you, and you get inspirations and ideas that you would never get on your own. You see every time new input, and comes an amplifying circle of creativity. The thoughts are never still. You know, you see stuff, you get pushed to new heights that you would never climb on your own. So even if you work in a very small practice, or if you work on your own, and you can use this Instamillion to check your ideas and get feedback, just as if you would be working in one of the biggest and best practices. And yeah, so let me just present the first of our projects. It's called The Lost Forest. And the project is about the issue of the missing green infrastructure in the inner cities. That is something we have researched on for quite a long time now. The cities have pushed back the green. We think that the green has to have a more important place in our cities. That's why we want to bring back small bits of green aisles and forest into the city. We want to fill gaps, empty plots, parking lots, small squares with those little bits of forest in order to bring back the forest into the city. We have limited the study to Luxembourg City because it's the area where we live in. And yeah, our goal is to bring back some, let's say like 5 green aisles per neighborhood. So we chose these little squares and placed like real bits of forest on them. And these days with the Corona pandemic lockdown, the topic is really up to date because we can really observe the nature growing back, and sometimes even in the inner city where we are not used to see animals anymore, we can see them coming back those days. Like everybody is noticing the birds singing now. We can hear it with less cars driving, and life has really come to a rest, sort of. So nature reappears in the most unusual places. The next one is a real project that we are building currently. It's the Maison de Maître. Maison de Maître is a typical traditional form of buildings here in Luxembourg. And our client bought one of these houses and he decided to renovate it completely. The Maison de Maître, this category is consisted of basement with a parking lot. Mostly it's like half a level below. And then the entry level, which is a little bit elevated, half a level above the street. And then another story and an attic story. Typically, it has a hip roof on the corner. So that's the existing building. The interesting fact about this project is that the client wanted to dig out a second basement under the existing building. So it was quite a challenge. Here you can see the process of digging out the house. The old house stops about here. And all this area, all this hole is below the existing building. So once all these supporting walls were done at the corners, the rest of the existing walls and slabs were knocked out and the existing building was completely emptied. And from there on, we are building now the new core from the second basement up to the roof. Here you can see the former entry door now is really hanging in the air. Yeah. And here you can see it's the garage. And this garden level, so we have a little lounge here behind the garage. The floor above is the entry level with the living area, the kitchen, dining room, and so on. And the two top floors are all the private rooms, sleeping rooms, up to the attic, bathrooms, and so on. Here's the section, so you can see the new basement that we added below the building. The next project on the list, Dubai, actually is the pavilion for the Expo 2020. We proposed our pavilion with the theme opportunities, diversity, and heritage. Our idea was to represent the European urban city skyline or silhouette, that's how we call it. And we use the volumes to shape this silhouette, this sort of skyline. And then as our concept, we took the Bedouin tent, which is the most sustainable and traditional form of living in the Arab culture. And from there, we wheeled our pavilion into the tent fabric in order to make it more subtle and more elegant. Our theory behind that is that we believe in a democratic approach between two opposites. For example, like old and new, or in this case, European and Middle Eastern. That's the back of the pavilion. In the main exhibition, our concept was to suspend typical Luxembourgish objects, such as a lore from the mining, or some old furniture like tables and chairs and cabinets. We even had trees, and everything was hanging from the ceiling, basically. So you can see the interior is very cozy with the tent fabric, and we had some rugs in there. And it was, yeah, the idea was to create this approach between European style and the desert style. And yeah, that's basically the three projects we wanted to present. And I think we can continue with the Q&A. and I'll try to answer all your questions that you might have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for this overview of your 3 projects. So let's start straight with sort of the design, because you're very famous, of course. Like you talked about this Instamillion with the drawings. Do you also use these collages to sort of convey the client, or then you just use technical drawings?
Yes, basically for these post digital illustrations, we use them to transport atmospheres and emotions and ideas. So in the very early stages of projects that we want to convey the message of the projects, we use these illustrations, because in the very early phase are more open to non-realistic drawings. And in later stages where they really want to see how it would look, because they now try to sell off, like the promoters, they would try to sell off now the apartments or the buildings. So in these stages of the projects, of course, we use the more realistic renders. But even in our renders, we always put a lot of attention and importance into the mood of the renders. We are not doing like photorealistic renders. We always keep a very fairy tale-like emotional atmosphere in our realistic renders also.
Before I ask my next question again to you all people out there on the internet, if you have any questions that you sort of wanted to ask Dagli Plus, now is your chance. Just write them down in the comment section below, and we will sort of transfer it live over to Luxembourg. My next question, Matthias, is like you have this very distinct way of showing architecture with those images. Was this from the very beginning, or was it something that developed? And sort of how did you find your way? How was the process of getting there where you are now?
Well, from the very beginning, since Türkan, you know, she's coming from a very technical background at the RWTH Aachen, the technical university in Aachen, and she always had this. She always had a lot of attention towards emotions in the drawings. So since the very beginning, she was doing like plans and technical drawings in a different way. And over the time, I can remember our very first render artists, we sort of educated them into and pushed them into these fairy tale emotional representation, you know, that style. I remember it was around 2000, let's say 8 to 10, when this style was not very popular yet. We really had to educate the artists to push them into this direction. And fortunately for us, like a couple of years later, it became the mainstream style of doing renders. And even our drawings, our plans, like authorization plans or execution plans, they are always we pay a lot of attention to emotions and artistic style, even in technical drawings. Yeah. So I think it's a very big point in the office to keep emotions and style in the drawings and in every visuals that we do.
And then, so for example, for a specific project, is there sort of like a template, like the Dagli Plus template that you always use with the same colors, or do you sort of try to find a new specific approach for every single building and site?
That's a very good question. The template thing is, you know, we have sometimes, you know, we normally, let's say, generally we work without templates, because the templates, if we do templates too much, our work becomes uniform. And we don't really want this, because we still want that every architect in our practice has his or her own style. That's why if it becomes too much template, we try to you know, to minimize the template. So every time somebody bring something beautiful in the drawing, like new plans or new people, we really develop all together on them, and we push this in a new direction. And like every time we get new ideas and inputs, we have new objects in our drawings. But especially you can see it on our Instagram page that every architect in the office has his own unique style.
Perfect. I'm just getting in the first question from Instagram, but I just have to wait until Chiara finishes telling me what the question is. Keep on asking your questions on Instagram and YouTube, on Facebook, and also write where you're watching from, so we know how far the question came. And also, people in Luxembourg are also allowed to ask, of course, if there's anything specific. Yeah, so okay, I'm still waiting for the answer to come. Maybe meanwhile, also a question that I had, Matthias, was do you use your philosophy, like the philosophical quotes that you use, do you use them sort of as a way to have an approach on your design, or do you also use them to sort of communicate to your clients?
It's a huge component of our creativity. We use it a lot for our ideas and to develop like artistic expressions and stuff like that. For the clients, sometimes, you know, we have a lot of regular clients, right? Let's say like 80% of our clients are like steady, like regular clients. They come back with every time with new projects, and it's only like 20% of clients that are new. So with the new clients, it's a little bit more complicated than with the other ones. The other ones, they understand us. So with these guys, sometimes we can, you know, we can confront them with some very philosophical, like really intellectual theory stuff, and they, even if they don't understand all of it, they still have a certain level of tolerance for it, you know. But the new clients, it's more complicated because we really, they don't understand us from the beginning, and we have to, you know, we have to feel each other first and to see if we are compatible. And because we are believing that the feeling has to be right, you know, we have to feel our client and our client has to feel us. So with these new clients, it's a little bit more complicated because if you start speaking in a very theoretical, philosophical language, they are pretty fast, they get lost, you know. So we try to minimize that in the communication side, but in the work, it's a huge part, yeah. And of course, if we have lectures in schools or in forums, podiums, of course, we use a lot of philosophical, yeah.
Wow, this must be very mind-blowing kind of philosophical classes then. Very good that we have you now here as well. Coming back to like the way you communicate, we have a first question from Kosovo, from on Instagram, from Vigan Zeka, who is asking, I see that in your Instagram page you use mostly collage representations, and now you just explained that you also do renderings as part of your practice. So why do you only publish collages and not the realistic renderings? So, dear people of the internet, sorry, our satellite, our own Mies TV satellite, was sort of behind the moon, and our connection got lost. But we shot it around the moon again, and the connection is back on, and we're very happy that Matthias is still here. And yeah, so the question we had from Kosovo on Instagram from Vegan Zeka was about your renderings and your collages. That you say that you also use renderings, but she said, why doesn't she see them on Instagram?
Yeah. So yeah, it was a very good question. I don't know how much you got already, but I'll try to repeat. Basically, we also posted sometimes renderings, but the renderings, the problem is that if you post a completely finished realistic rendering, you have very few room for interpretation and to develop own thoughts and ideas and emotions about it. So we prefer to we have two types. We have we use raw renders, and then we do a complete collage, or sometimes we use the realistic renders also, but we just cut them out. We use just the buildings and we put them again in the very in the illustration, in a fairy tale environment. And basically that's the two type of collage you can see on our Instagram page.
Okay, we have the next question from Emre Senoglu, Senoglu
from Turkey.
Yes, maybe on YouTube, definitely. Who says, hello, one question that's been on my mind recently about the way medium small practices work. Do your architects work as independent workers, or do they have a specific role? And is sort of every architect on your team able to carry a project from start to end, or do you prefer building up teams?
We are doing a little bit of all, but most, like I explained with the template question, we have our architects mainly, the base idea is that they carry a project from the very first idea to the very end. And then, like what I was a little bit saying with this Instamillion theory, you always need a constant input and new ideas. And so even inside the office, we need to use our cloud. So even in the office, we swap a lot the projects, the architects swap a lot the projects. So sometimes architect X is working on the project, and the next couple of weeks it's another one. And every time the project sort of stalls, or if a client wants a new idea, the project bounces from one architect to the other, or sometimes it's in teams. Sometimes we have so complicated projects that we really need manpower, and we work with 3 or 4 architects on the project. And then also what we always do is team discussions. So the project leader would present the projects, and the team will give their inspirations, ideas, thoughts, and everything. And from there we can see that's the this the athletics. That's the exercise actually. Every time we redo, we start again, we start over, we get new input. So even in the office, sometimes it's frustrating for our architects because they get sort of annoyed if they get the 30th idea that they have to integrate in the project. But that's the way how our projects become what they are, basically.
So speaking of the uniqueness that you have as an office, Anne Wies on YouTube is asking, is Luxembourg appreciating and understanding the emotional style in your impressions? Looking at other architecture offices in Luxembourg, they are most of the time showing more classical renders, as far as she knows.
Yes, we are. We have. That's what they call in the French. In the French language, that's what they call a griffe. A griffe is like a trademark. So we have this trademark in Luxembourg because Türkan style now is really becoming sort of a trademark. Because when somebody sees our projects, they really start to recognize it. because like you said, we have this unique emotional style in a big pool of more realistic traditional architecture. Yeah.
Okay, again, the call to all of you people out there, if you have any questions, any further questions, just write in the comment section below and we will ask it straight to Matthias. Another question that sort of is interesting when young offices make or like young people make an office, how did you actually meet? And how did you decide, let's make an office?
Well, Turkan had, she was, for the first couple of years after the diploma, she was working in very big and famous practices. And I met her by coincidence. I was working in Luxembourg. I just see her. I just saw her ad. I applied there, and that's how we got in contact. From there, I remember the first project that I did was a very good. It was Akbank, the Turkish bank interior, and it was a very, very, very nice project. And that's with this project, I was so happy with this project. So I really fell in love, sort of, with the practice, actually. Yeah.
Speaking of like the current situation that we have all around the world with this whole Corona situation that you also already managed, how is it for you as a young office to deal with this, and what happened so far?
Well, in Luxembourg, it was quite straightforward because it was, the European ministers, they are always meeting. I think it's on Thursday in Luxembourg. So on this Thursday, the French president decided the national lockdown starting on Monday, and the Luxembourgish minister did the same. So from day one to the next day, all the construction sites were shut down, and we went into home office, actually, like everybody else. And it was quite, we were not used to it, actually, because like in the previous question that I explained, our creative cloud, if you get disconnected from your creative cloud, it's a really new feeling. Like all of a sudden you're just sitting home in the green with a blank screen. So you have to start all over by yourself. And if that is not the way that you normally work, you have to kind of sort of learn a new way of approach. And the first week was like this, but it was developing in something new. At the end, it was very, I think everybody in the office liked it because we were a little bit more, we had room to develop like ideas in a way that we weren't able to when we were physically in the same room. And so I think it has positive aspects, definitely. Yeah.
So you're saying that now that you're all sort of in your own home office, that the way of thinking about architecture and maybe developing is a new one or a different one, or sort of we find new ways of designing?
Yeah, well, this week the lockdown for the construction site was over, actually. So from now on, we are physically, at least we have shifts, like everybody else. Some of us are physically back in the office, but it's really weird because the office is really empty. So this week I was with Türkan and Sebastian in the office, and the rest of the staff is still working at home. And we have some really like positive aspects about the home working. So we will try to develop like a mixture of both, like some of us will do on a certain period, maybe do a home office, and other ones will be in the office. But I think it's, like I said, the physical absence in the office is also giving you room to work with muse and concentration just on the tasks that you are really focusing on.
Now, if we get more like philosophical again, because you also showed your project with the forest, and sort of that forest comes back into the city. What do you think, philosophically, maybe even speaking, what sort of does this whole time do with us people living in the city and our relationship with the public space? Do you think there's like a new view how people see the public space and its value?
Definitely, yes. Definitely people are missing the public space, and especially not even the physical public space, but also the interactions on top of or in the public space. So even now with the lockdown, you can still go outside and you have the empty physical public space. So that's really weird, because you will see spaces that were always crowded, and now all of a sudden you are the only actor in them. And that's why you have new sort of perspectives, and the physical empty space can also now give you inspirations that you didn't have like before. And I think after, at least in the first time, when the lockdown is over, in at least in the first half of a year, or I don't know how long, the people will probably be more conscious about the human interactions and the public spaces, the environment. But I don't know how long this effect will last. But I think definitely the phase of the lockdown really changes people's behavior, I think.
And then who knows, maybe it might also change the way we do architecture, or maybe that politics goes on for a new way.
We really hope so, because we really think that to bring a certain portion of green into the built environment is very, very important. And it's really unfortunate that the green is not valued enough. It's like when you try to bring, let's say you want to bring a certain amount of square meters of a building, you want to turn it into green, like inner or outer gardens. The promoters will tell you, yeah, but it has no value, we cannot sell it. That's why I think that's how everybody thinks. So I think it's very important, especially with the Fridays for Future and the whole movement about the climate change and call to actions. I think it's very important that we as architects and designers also try to really reserve a certain space to the green in order to make life and building sustainable.
Perfect. I think that's a very good last quote, and sort of like a way to say what we as architects should do, and to sort of be aware of our responsibilities. Thank you so much for your time and for this very little glimpse that you gave us. There, maybe if you also want to talk, because I saw on Instagram you have this dagli Friday open call.
The Friday posts. that was our response to the Corona crisis, actually. So we have these Friday competitions, or like invitations, that we give out raw renders, and we let the crowd do their own thoughts and creativity, and we really love it. The feedback is incredible. It's really incredible. And I think it's really a huge gift for us that people are really participating in it, and it's really great to see what we get back from it.
Were there any big surprises, or like during this, did you find something very interesting, a dynamic that you didn't think of before with those things what people handed in?
Honestly, I don't even remember how we came up with this idea, because we never did it before, right? It just started, I think, in the second week, or I think in the second or third week of the lockdown. We just came up with the idea to just to throw out a raw render and let people like create something out of it. And I think it was a great idea. And I hope that we will continue it after the lockdown even.
So again, like a call out for everyone to join the dagli open call with your collages and your drawings. Thank you so much. We will sort of continue looking what you guys at Dagli Plus are doing, and also what all your fans are posting and sharing. And at the very end, I can also say what Mies is going to do up next. Next week on Tuesday, we have a very big screening of our documentary that we have only showed in physical space, and now for the first time we will show it digitally. And it is from actually quite fitting what Matthias was talking today. It's about beauty and how and why beauty matters in architecture. So last year in Tallinn, in Estonia, there was a Tallinn Architecture Biennale created by Jelle Reisner, and she said beauty matters. And she sort of says that beauty is this forbidden word that architects don't use. And all the other people know how to talk about beauty and they know what beauty is, but sort of architects are ashamed to use this word. So at the Biennale, she invited people like Su Fujimoto, like Space Popular, to sort of talk about their approach in beauty. And then also to help us out, she invited mathematicians, philosophers, poets, to sort of help out architects what beauty is. So we will premiere this documentary live next week on 28th of April, where you can see Su Fujimoto's views on architecture, and also from a point of philosophy and from neuroaesthetics that sort of tries to find out what happens in your brain when you look at images of Dagli Plus on Instagram and which parts of the brain get turned on. So everyone, see you hopefully next week again. Thank you so much to Luxembourg, to Matthias.
Thanks to Vienna and Austria.
And to all the world as well. And stay safe, and see you again next week. Thank you, and good night, good morning, or good evening.
Take care. Bye.